We stand with Marc Lamont Hill.
Yes, we
stand. Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine.
CNN, tell the truth. Don't let Zionists silence you. CNN, tell the truth. Don't let Zionists silence you. CNN, tell the truth. Don't let Zionists silence you. CNN, tell the truth. Don't let Zionists silence you. CNN, tell the truth. Don't let Zionists silence you. CNN.
I want to say why we are here.
I want to say why we are here.
We are here in support.
We are here in support
of Dr. Marc Lamont Hill.
Of Dr. Marc Lamont Hill.
And we are outraged.
And we are outraged.
That CNN.
That CNN.
It's shitty anyway. Terminated. Dr. Hill.
Dr. Hill.
Over his comments. At the United Nations.
At the United Nations.
Which we call the United Nothing. The United Nothing. After he spoke out. Against Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people. Dr. Hill said. Everybody should be free.
Everybody should be free.
From the river to the sea.
From the river to the sea.
And the Zionists got hurt.
And the Zionists got hurt.
So they pressured CNN. To silence. The realist. Journalist. That speaks for the people.
One more is cool.
They take care of us, you see how people. I'm hoping that this will be the beginning of a real fight against anti-Semitic white supremacist Zionists.
The Palestinian Youth Movement wrote a statement along with the Swana Alliance in support of Marc Lamont Hill that I'd like to read for you all today. It was co-authored by the both of us. And just to remind people that they can take action to demand that Marc Lamont Hill is reinstated by going to the CNN website and filling out their contact form, and also calling the CNN number. I'm not going to say the number now, but you can go online and find it. As Palestinian, Arab, and Swana youth, we are writing in support of Marc Lamont Hill and his righteous support of the Palestinian struggle for liberation and self-determination at the United Nations on Wednesday, November 28th, 2018, for the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. The Zionist backlash he is facing is slanderous and a continuation of selective suppression of speech. Among the actions taken against Marc has been the CNN's cowardly response, stating that he is no longer under contract with the news organization. We wholeheartedly condemn any and all intimidation to silence Marc, which reflects the United States history of targeting people of color, specifically black folks, for their political activism. CNN claims to champion facts first, but turns away from honest reporting on Palestine. This comes as no surprise, as CNN repeatedly demonizes and spews racist rhetoric about Palestinians, even while they are being massacred, displaced, and incarcerated by the settler colonial entity Israel. We encourage any and all other institutions and organizations that employ Marc or use his labor to refrain from taking the same unjust actions. We commend Marc Lamont Hill for taking a courageous position at the UN Committee on the exercise of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian peoples, recognizing that the Zionist settler colonial state cannot be both a democratic state for all of its residents and also a Jewish ethno-state, as the political ideology of Zionism necessitates. Marc called for a free Palestine from the river to the sea. Marc has participated in and organized several delegations to Palestine with revolutionary leaders of black liberation, including Dream Defenders and Black Youth Project 100, and has been working in solidarity with the Palestinian community for several years. We honor his commitment to racial justice and liberation and commit to showing up for him. It is apparent that those who seek to envision the full equality of Palestinian human rights, liberation, and right of return face large repercussions of punishment.
That's right.
These attacks ultimately undermine not only media coverage of the Palestinian struggle in the West, but the entire profession of journalism, serving to erase both the political movement journalists aim to capture and the oppression that journalists of conscience expose. In the larger context, the right to Palestinian sovereignty and existence has been and continues to be denied, and right of return of all Palestinians who have been displaced are made into refugees time and time again, outside and within the homeland, and the demand for all of historic Palestine to return to its indigenous population is not even a thought in the minds of colonizers, oppressors, and Israel apologists. The liberation of all peoples, the freedom of movement, and the right of return are the root causes of contention in the face of Zionism, Zionist backlash, and Israeli institutions, companies, and aggression. These are the same reasons Marc is being targeted for his message. Because he dares to challenge the status quo. His statements at the UN are just a glimpse of the history in which our people have suffered under the colonial state of Israel for the past 70 years.
Yes, sir!
Globally, people have stood at intersections of building with one another, working towards creating a world that we want to see. Watching Marc convey his support for a liberated world free of state violence exemplifies the power of joint struggle, and we follow his lead in this effort.
That's right.
The backlash against Marc Lamont Hill is an attack on Black and Palestinian liberation movements in an attempt to crush and silence those who dare to question the Zionist settler colonial entity Israel and bring this consciousness to the mainstream.
That's right.
The targeting of Black people who commit to joint struggle with Palestinians is a manifestation of the intersections of global systems of colonialism, anti-Blackness, and oppression. We are committed to dismantling these systems.
Yes, sir.
We condemn the determination of Marc Lamont Hill, and we reaffirm his tireless pursuit of justice essential to liberation movements around the world. We stand with Marc Lamont Hill.
Yes, we
stand. Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
My name is Alexi Shalom. I'm from Within Our Lifetime United for Palestine. We are a Palestinian-led youth group based in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn, and the rest of New York City that grew out of the campuses actually supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. And so Marc and all of the Black activists in this country that stand up for Palestine are actually those that inspired us to organize ourselves in the same way that the brave people of Ferguson and Baltimore and Oakland and New York City organized themselves. And so we draw direct inspiration for them, and so it's no coincidence that we would show up here for them today and for Marc Lamont Hill today. You know, I think that when people talk about Palestine, it's often talked about in a way Palestine versus Israel, right? I think Michael Letwin said it best just now, that it's not Palestine versus Israel because Israel is not a state. It's a military regime that rules over a people. And so and I think Marc Lamont Hill said it really well in his response when he said, you know, if you believe that Israel has to be destroyed in order for Palestinians to get their rights, that's your problem, because how can you support a regime that needs to be destroyed for people to have their basic rights? Anti-Zionism is not a radical, crazy political position that doesn't want to divide the country. Anti-Zionism is the fulfillment of the basic human rights of the Palestinian people and all oppressed people all over the world. And I think this is really important because often I think, you know, growing up in New York City, growing up in Brooklyn, we see Palestine as something very far away. But Israel is a regime that doesn't only oppress Palestinians. In the last few years, Israel's leader Netanyahu has been meeting with the Jobbik Nazi party in Hungary, has been training Nazi militias in Ukraine, has been supporting far-right regimes all over the world, including the South African regime with whom they developed their own nuclear weapons. And so when we fight for anti-Zionism, when we fight for freedom from the river to the sea, it's not just a fight for Palestinian human rights, but for oppressed people all over the world. I think it's also important that we situate CNN in this whole scenario. CNN has put itself as the voice of the so-called resistance in the United States against the Donald Trump regime. But we know that Israel is best friends with the Donald Trump regime. That Israel secures political, economic, and social support from Donald Trump, just as it secured that support from past U.S. presidents. And so it's really important that CNN is not a progressive channel. CNN is a business that sells a product, and right now the product that sells is so-called progressive news, and that is the only reason why they are supporting Hillary Clinton or supporting the so-called resistance and the Democratic machine. And so it's really important that we see that when CNN's bottom line is challenged, right, for them to put forward an anti-Zionist commentator, he is cut immediately. And so we condemn CNN for their attack on free speech in the media, but also for their hypocritical stand with the so-called resistance. The only resistance we stand with is the anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist resistance of Marc Lamont Hill and others. Thank you so much.
Okay. From the river.
From the river.
To the sea.
To the sea.
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
We saw the need. I had Brother Basim Hassan from Philadelphia with me. Mumia's brother from North Carolina. Keith Cook. And Brother Basim's daughter here. Kaltha Hassan. And Sister Johanna Fernandez. We all came here, and because there's a need to be. Not only is there an attack on Marc Lamont Hill, and we must deal with it, but we got to look at the whole big picture. Journalists should be here. Every journalist that there is, and we got to see to it that when we organize, that we bring them into the picture as well. Because if they don't speak out, and journalism is being terrorized by this government. Since when did from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, a terrorist situation here? The Zionists is trying to stop the sound, the movement of resistance to murder, bombing, killing, locking up of innocent people. As we stand here, how many indigenous people of this land is here? How many? Can you see them? If they're here, some people don't even know who they are. That's because of exactly what Zionism is doing here, is what happened to the indigenous people of, people call, the indigenous people call us Turtle Island, and the murderers call this
Wake 'em up.
America.
Wake them up.
That's right.
If we don't stand up now and continue, I'm looking at people who are seasoned, who have been standing up for years and years, and some people born into the movement, and but we have got to come together, organize a whole lot more, bring people into the point where they can understand that what's happening in Palestine is what happened to the indigenous people right here. They maimed, murdered, killed, raped, and just took people away from their families, and who thought that, who was indigenous, and they wound up thinking that there was something else when they got finished fighting against their own people. And there's a whole lot of this here. I was at a meeting last night, and it wasn't about Marc Lamont Hill, but I made it about Marc Lamont Hill. And one of the people said, well, didn't he know that if he spoke up for Palestine on CNN that he will be fired? Mark knew that he must tell the truth. He went to Palestine. He's not one of the people that sit down and read about it in a book, and that's a good thing when people do. But he took it a little further. He had to go there and see for himself. The sign says, fuck CNN. Nancy did that one. But what I'm saying is, when he came and he saw it, what was going on there, he came back and he was organizing here in Philadelphia and wherever he could to take people back so that they can see what was going on and give people the example of what we must do. Not sit by and be comfortable and say, oh my God, that is so wrong. Or if he went there and to come back, don't get on CNN and talk about it. Don't go to the UN and talk about it. And organize quietly. This is a time that we all have got to come out of our comfortable spots and get on the front line. This is not just about Marc Lamont Hill. This is not just about the murders that's happening in the taking of the land in Palestine. This is about the taking of the land. These filthy low-down motherfuckers, they're not only fighting about taking Palestinian land, they're doing this around the whole globe. These people are cold-blooded murderers, like the last poet said. We don't know where these motherfuckers come from. These people don't give a damn about the air. They don't give a damn about the water. They don't give a damn about the soil. They don't give a damn about their own selves. Because how can you bomb, murder, and kill where you live at? How can you holler about what happened to you? The murders of Jewish people, and then turn around and allow this stuff to happen in Palestine. Allow the voice of Marc Lamont Hill to try to silence, because they can't silence Marc Lamont Hill. They can't silence none of us. Our numbers look small here today, but in Philadelphia, I found out as we were coming up here, they're organizing in Philadelphia. They're taking to the streets there. They're taking to the streets in other places.
Thank you so much for organizing this. When I heard last night that there was a demonstration here, I thought that this is a brilliant opportunity to revive a long tradition of Black and Palestinian solidarity that we need desperately today. Marc Lamont Hill went to Palestine as part of a long tradition of African Americans going abroad to the places where people are oppressed to bear witness to oppression, to bear witness to land displacement, to bear witness to war. And what he saw in Palestine was the fact that Palestinians at every turn are stopped at gunpoint by the Israeli state. There's absolutely no freedom in Palestine. Palestinians are living in an apartheid state. And who are the Palestinians? Palestinians are the people who in 1948, over 1 million of them, were marched out of their lands by the Zionists. And we know that UN Resolution 242 says that all colonized and displaced people have the right to defend themselves by any means necessary. 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 So, Marc Lamont Hill, having borne witness to the atrocities in Philadelphia, in Palestine, came back and spoke truth to power.
That's right.
He did the same thing that Malcolm X did.
That's right.
When he went to Palestine and to the Muslim world in the 1960s. He came back and spoke about what he saw there. He did absolutely nothing wrong. He spoke at the UN, at the place that actually confirmed, despite its challenges as an organization, that all colonized and oppressed people have the right to defend themselves and to free themselves from their oppressors by any means necessary. I think it's very important that African Americans went there like Marc Lamont Hill. What CNN didn't tell us is that, in fact, Marc Lamont Hill went there with people who are part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Now, why did the people of the Black Lives Matter movement go to Philadelphia? To Palestine. To Palestine. Well, did you know that 1 in 5 Palestinians have been imprisoned? 1 in 5 Palestinian people have been imprisoned. Palestinians are demonized, criminalized, much like African Americans. They're killed in the street by supremacists as they're killed here by the police, as black people are killed here by the police and white supremacists. So there is a lot that African Americans have in common with the Palestinian people. They suffer the same oppression. They suffer the same criminalization. They suffer the same atrocities at the hands of the state. And so what CNN needs to report is that Marc Lamont Hill went to Palestine because he saw in the Palestinian people the same struggle that black people have in this country, the same struggle that Native Americans have in this country, the same struggle that Latino immigrants, that Mexicans have in this struggle. And until we realize that our oppression here is connected to the oppression in Palestine, is connected to the oppression in Iraq, is connected to the oppression in Mexico, we will not win. So we have to hold up Marc Lamont Hill as a hero. We have to hold up Marc Lamont Hill as one of us, as someone who stands for the Palestinians and someone who stands for the oppressed people, for working class people in this country. And we all in this city and in this world have to stand up and be courageous and march and bear witness in that tradition. So we have to go from here knowing that this is just the beginning. Temple University has said that they stand with Marc Lamont Hill. But the Zionists have an enormous amount of power in this country. So there is going to be a struggle in the next couple of weeks over whether or not Marc Lamont Hill is displaced from his position. So we have to keep fighting, we have to continue to be vigilant, and we have to say that Palestine, like the native people in this country, like African Americans, like the oppressed and exploited working class in this country, and like the oppressed people of all the world, will be free. Thank you.
50 years ago,
50 years ago,
51 years ago,
51 years ago,
on April 4th,
on April 4th,
1967,
1967,
Dr. Martin Luther King,
Dr. Martin Luther King,
speaking at Riverside Church here in New York City,
speaking at Riverside Church in New York City,
condemned the Vietnam War.
condemned the Vietnam War.
And for that
Courageous position,
he was vilified by the liberal mainstream media. If there was such a thing as CNN, in 1967, they would have fired him. But it didn't stop him from connecting the oppression of people at home, of black people, of poor people, of brown people, of working class people, with the genocide being committed by the United States government against the Vietnamese people, and essentially calling for all of Vietnam to be free. Now we're here, 51 years, almost 52 years later, in 2018, and Dr. Marc Lamont Hill
Dr. Marc Lamont Hill.
Speaking in the spirit of Martin Luther King.
Speaking in the spirit of Martin Luther King.
Has denounced Israeli apartheid. And oppression. And called for all of Palestine to be free. From the river to the sea. And he's right. And CNN is wrong. And ADL is wrong. And he's being vilified. And politically lynched. Just the way Dr. Martin Luther King was in 1968.
Just the way Dr. Martin Luther King was in 1968.
But just as Martin Luther King stood firm, so is Dr. Hill. And it's important to echo what my sister here just said a moment ago. Israel is not a people. It's not a country. It's a regime. An apartheid regime. That temporarily occupies the nation of Palestine. And freedom from the river to the sea. Means equality for all people. One democratic state. Throughout historic Palestine. From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free.
Please make some noise for Michaela from Stop the FBI Repression.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, everyone.
Oh, we're doing mic check. Okay, let's do this. I'm Michaela. I'm from the Committee Stop FBI Repression. And my organization was founded because 23 anti-war activists spoke out against the war of the U.S. and in support of Israel. And then the FBI targeted them. So we know something about curtailing free speech and how this country views anyone who decides to speak up against imperialism.
Anti-Semite bastard! Shut up!
I'm fucking Jewish, man! What do you want?
What's up?
Anyways, the point is, I lost my thread. The point is that we know how the United States views free speech. And since Donald Trump has been elected, CNN has been crying and lamenting the fact that this country is taking away their press badge, is taking away their freedom to report honestly about the crimes of Donald Trump. But the moment one of their journalists decides to talk about the atrocities of Israel in Palestine, that's when they decide to fire him. Where is CNN supposedly honoring the lives of Palestinians? Where is CNN preaching the truth and free speech? Where is CNN reporting honest journalism? And that's because CNN is not honest. CNN is a mouthpiece of not the Republicans, but of the Democrats. CNN is the mouthpiece of the liberal imperialists. CNN is the mouthpiece of liberal Zionists. And there is no such thing as a good Zionist. You cannot be a good Zionist if you believe your freedom as a person depends on the slaughtering of thousands of Palestinians. You cannot be a good Zionist if your freedom and identity depends on stealing land. I am Jewish, so you telling me that my identity as a Jewish person depends on the murder and genocide of people, I say you cannot tell me that as a Jewish woman that my identity is based on this land that I have never been on. You cannot tell me that I, who live in the United States, have to take away the lives of millions. Palestinians are the largest refugee population in the world today, and nobody talks about that. How dare you tell me that my home is somebody else's home? That is not the truth, and I refuse to make other people's home my home. Their freedom will not make me oppressed.
Marc
was the sole representative of civil society invited to speak at the United Nations International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people on November 28th. By the following day, Zionist groups, including the Anti-Defamation League, alleged that Marc was an anti-Semite and called on CNN to drop Marc as a political commentator. The corporate news outlet fired him a few hours later. Marc has been an outspoken advocate for human rights for all people. His most notable work has been his advocacy for Palestinian rights and for black people in the US settler state. He was one of the only voices on CNN, black or otherwise, with a commitment to speaking truth to power. Groups like the Anti-Defamation League and CNN claim to be liberal supporters of civil rights and free speech, except when it comes to the actual liberation of oppressed people, whether they are Palestinian or black. The ADL's attack on Marc Lamont Hill fits into a longer legacy of Zionists attacking black activists for their stances on Palestine, including SNCC in 1967, the Black Panther Party, and UN Ambassador Andrew Young, who was fired from his position for speaking to the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1979. At the end of his speech at the UN, Marc said, "Free Palestine from the river to the sea." Zionists claimed this comment was anti-Semitic and suggested that Marc was advocating for violence against Jewish people. This is akin to the people who think Black Lives Matter is a call to kill or destroy white people. Criticizing Israel is not the same as criticizing Jewish people.
That's right.
The Israeli occupation state, like the US settler state, is a political entity, not a religion or a people. Calling for the end of systems that have murdered, expelled, and segregated innocent people is not anti-Semitism or reverse racism. It's justice.
That's right.
Zionists and white supremacists are uncomfortable with the phrases Free Palestine or Black Lives Matter because they understand that Israel and the US are built on racism and oppression. They implicitly understand that righting these wrongs requires them to give up their privileges, including access to land, wealth, and social power. As other commenters have pointed out, we wish violence and racism against black and Palestinian people was taken as seriously as allegations of anti-Semitism. We live in a world that murders and subjugates us on a daily basis. Our own cries for justice are ignored or distorted by the media and politicians who justify our oppression. Zionism and white supremacy are incompatible with human rights. Marc Lamont Hill spoke on a moral obligation to criticize American and Israeli state violence. This demonstrates what solidarity means as a verb and not just a noun. We close with the closing remarks of his speech. As we stand here on the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the tragic commemoration of the Nakba, we have an opportunity to not just offer solidarity in words, but to commit to political action, grassroots action, local action, and international action that will give us what justice requires. And that is a free Palestine from the river to the sea.
Not another nickel!
Not another dime! No more money for Israel's crimes! Not another nickel! Not another dime! No more money for Israel's crimes! Not another nickel! Not another dime! No more media for Zionist crimes! Not another nickel! Not another dime! No more media for Zionist crimes!
I'm just going to say one thing. I don't give speeches. My name is Peter Feld. I'm an individual. I'm Jewish, like several of the other speakers that have come up, and I want to read you from Twitter something that was posted by Seb Gorka, who said, "Finally fired," about Marc Lamont Hill the other day. Seb Gorka was a member of the Trump administration, and as a member of the Trump administration, he wore a medal from a fascist Hungarian organization that continues to support Hitler. And he said on Twitter, I can't find it right now, but he said, "Finally fired, now it's time for all the other anti-Semites that CNN and the left supports." So Seb Gorka, who is a Nazi, is calling people like me, who's Jewish, an anti-Semite. The Nazis are calling the Jews anti-Semites for supporting equality, for supporting racial equality. And I just want to say, as a Jewish person, that I reject this. I reject being called an anti-Semite by a Nazi, and I want to stand here with everybody else demanding that CNN stop putting people like Seb Gorka and Alan Dershowitz, who is a credibly accused child rapist, on their airwaves, and stop hiring ex-AIPAC officials like Wolf Blitzer to tell us the news, and start putting people on television who tell the truth. Thank you.
Yeah.
CNN, tell the truth!
CNN, tell the truth!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
CNN, tell the truth!
CNN, tell the truth!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
CNN, tell the truth!
CNN, tell the truth!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
CNN, tell the truth!
CNN, tell the truth!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
Don't let Zionists silence you!
Dr. Hill, you spoke the truth!
Dr. Hill, you spoke the truth!
CNN can't silence you!
CNN can't silence you!
Dr. Hill, you spoke the truth!
Dr. Hill, you spoke the truth!
CNN can't silence you!
CNN can't silence you!
From the river
to the sea,
Palestine will be free.
Palestine will be free.
From the river to the sea.